The candlestick swung in her hand, and the windowpane gave way under it with a sound like a struck bell. Helena pulled the brass back through the broken square of glass and did not waste a heartbeat looking at her own knuckles. She had heard him in the gravel below. Boots that did not belong to the gardener, did not belong to the steward, did not belong to any boots that had been allowed to walk this side of Halford Manor in 8 years. The east wing of the house had been locked at the corridor door, locked at the stair, locked at the window catches. Her family had locked her behind every door they could find, told the counties she was marked, told the suitors she was unwell, and walked her younger sister past her closed corridor every morning so the lie could feed itself. Today they had unlocked exactly one thing, the south end of the east wing, where the renovation crew was scaffolding a new bay, and the man on the gravel below was the man whose money was rebuilding it. She had heard his name twice through floorboards. She had read his initials on a contract her father had left briefly, brutally unattended, and she had pressed the corner of that contract against an ink-soft piece of paper and copied the seal in the time it took her aunt to ring for tea. She had been preparing for this morning for 9 days. The drawing she had folded into a square sat on her palm, light as a leaf and tighter than a fist. She did not throw it through the broken pane. She tucked the candlestick under her arm and tied the folded paper with a black ribbon, calmly, the way another woman ties a hat, and weighted it with a fragment of the broken glass on a length of darning thread, because if she simply dropped it, the wind would send it into the box hedge, and Halford would lose another year of her life. Then she leaned through the cold air and let the package down past the casement, past the second-floor window where her mother had not stood since 1810, past the empty sash where the conservatory had been, before the conservatory had been pulled down for the renovation that her own pen had drawn. The boots stopped. Helena did not breathe. The drawing turned twice on its thread, white against the grey of the November stone, and a gloved hand came up out of nowhere and caught it. She watched the gloved hand. It was a large hand. The thumb was bare of any signet she could identify from this height. The thumb had a faint white scar along the joint that her draftsman's eye registered before her heart did. Chisel scar. Narrow. Very old. The hand turned the package over once, the way a man turns a card he has been dealt. And then a man's voice said, very quietly, very clearly, very unmistakably, "Whose hand drew this?" It was not a question. He had read the seal. He had recognized the line. Helena pulled herself back from the window. She breathed twice. She did not cool down. She tucked the candlestick back into its holder on the chimneypiece, took the ivory stub of pencil out of her sleeve where she kept it, slid it into the breast of her gown against her ribs. And then she did the second thing she had spent 9 days preparing. She walked across her room. 12 steps, she had counted them across 8 years, and could count them blindfolded, to the corridor door, the door that had been locked from the outside since she was 19 years old. She put her ear against it. She heard the housekeeper's keys jangling at the stair, frantic. She heard her father's footstep, which was always heavier on his right than his left, hurrying. She heard, very distantly, the Duke's voice in the entry hall, and the Duke was saying, clearly, with the patience of a man who has already decided how this morning would end, that he would like, at once, to see who lived in the east wing. Helena Halford stepped back from the door. She put her shoulders against the chimneypiece. She was wearing a morning dress of plain grey wool that had been mended at the elbow, and her dark auburn hair had been pinned by her own hands. And her face, the face her family had told the county was marked, the face her father had told visiting suitors had been ruined by smallpox in 1810, was unmarked, unsmallpoxed, and steady. She had been a beautiful, stubborn child. She was a beautiful, far worse-tempered woman. Her eyes were a quiet, greenish-grey, that had read more architectural treatises than most men of her father's club had read newspapers, and her hands were ink-stained at the second joint of every finger. The housekeeper's key turned in the corridor lock, the first time it had turned the right direction in 8 years. The door opened, not by the housekeeper, but by the man with the chisel-scarred thumb. He filled the doorway the way a horse fills a stall. Too much shoulder, too much breath, his indigo riding coat dust-streaked at the cuffs from the scaffolding. He stopped one step inside the room. The folded drawing was open in his bare hand. He did not look at her face first. He looked at the drawing, and then at the chimney-piece behind her, and then at the corner of the south wall, where the casement she had broken let in a thin draught of November. Then he looked at her. He had dark brown hair cut shorter than was the fashion, and dark blue eyes set deep, and a mouth that had clearly not been informed it was meant to be polite this morning. He was perhaps 28. He was extremely tall. He was looking at her with the steady, unblinking attention of a man trying to make a calculation match a fact, and the fact was disagreeing with him. "Madam," he said, after a long, considering breath, "my name is Edmund Cresswell. I am the Duke of Stanmore." He held the drawing up between them, courteously, as a man returns a hat. "This is the foundation reinforcement plan I have been paying for since 1817, which my contract attributes to your father." He paused. "And which I have just watched be lowered out of a third-floor casement on a piece of darning thread by a woman who does not appear to be in this room by choice." Helena lifted her chin a fraction. Her ink-stained fingers laced themselves at the front of her grey gown. The ivory pencil stub against her ribs warmed. "Your Grace," she said. Her voice was clear and quiet. It had not been used at length in 9 days. She did not let that show. "My name is Lady Helena Halford. The drawing in your hand is mine. I drew it in the spring of 1817, in the room you are standing in. The line at the upper left was redone in the autumn of that year, when I corrected the load calculation by half a stone per square foot." She let her eyes travel deliberately to the broken casement, then back to him. "The window I have just broken is the window I was forbidden to open. The corridor door behind you is the door I have not been permitted through since the November I declined a marriage to a man I had met twice." A pause. She did not soften any of it. "And the steward who unlocked it for you in the last 40 seconds did so under the impression that he was preventing a fire." The Duke of Stanmore stood very still for a moment. "Was he?" he said, with the faintest dry attention. "Preventing a fire?" "Not yet," Helena said. A pause. "My Lord Halford," Edmund said, not loudly, but loudly enough to carry to the corridor, where her father had drawn up at the threshold with an expression that had the quality of a man finding water in a cellar he had been told for years was dry. "I find I would prefer to take tea with you in the green drawing-room in 20 minutes. With Lady Halford. With both of your daughters." He turned the drawing over in his hand. "And I would be obliged if you would have your steward leave this corridor unlocked for the remainder of the morning." Lord Halford opened his mouth. He closed it again. He inclined his head with the smile of a man who had been outmaneuvered before he understood what game had been played. He retreated. Edmund turned back. His dark blue gaze moved once over the room, the cot, the drawing table, the stack of treatises beside the cold grate, the wall above the mantel where Helena had pinned 6 years of North Elevation studies in pencil and chalk, and his jaw set. "Lady Helena," he said, in a voice that was careful enough to make her ink-stained fingers tighten. "May I ask one question before I take that tea?" "You may." "Has anyone in this house," he said, "ever shown anyone in London the work above your mantel?" Helena looked at him steadily. Her grey-green eyes did not waver. Outside the broken casement, a rook called once across the gravel of the front drive, and a leaf fell across the windowsill in a small, perfect, obedient curve. The kind of curve she had drawn 10,000 times. "My father," she said, "showed an architect named Reginald Pell the south elevation in May of 1816. Mr. Pell submitted it under his own name to the Royal Society of Architects in June. He was awarded a medal for it in October." A breath. "The medal hangs in my father's study." Mr. Pell visits us 4 times a year. He is to dine here on Friday. He is the man my father intends my younger sister to marry." There was a silence in the room. The Duke of Stanmore looked at the drawing in his hand. Then he looked at the wall above her mantel. Then he looked at her. Really looked at her, head tilted slightly, the way a man examines a building whose plans he has just realized he has been holding upside down for years. And Helena watched a small, dangerous calm enter his face. It was the calm of a man who builds things, and who has just understood that something he had thought built was lying. "Lady Helena," he said, "I think we should have that tea." He left the room. He did not lock the door behind him. The corridor stayed open. Helena Halford turned, walked to the broken casement, picked the largest fragment of glass out of the sill, and laid it carefully on her drawing table beside the ivory pencil stub. She did not weep. She had not wept in 8 years, and was not going to begin in front of a draft. She unpinned the south elevation study from the wall above her mantel, rolled it tightly, and tied it with the black ribbon she had used on the package. Then she opened the door of the wardrobe, the one her aunt had kept locked, with the gowns her aunt had pretended did not exist. And she lifted out the ruby silk that had been folded inside it for 8 years. It still fit. She had not intended to wear it again in this house. She put it on anyway. The green drawing room at Halford Manor had not been used for unguarded company since 1810. The Countess of Halford had taken great care to keep it that way. It faced south, it had 3 long windows that the autumn light fell through in honey, and its walls were a pale, fashionable green that flattered every woman under 60 who set foot in it. It had been the room in which Helena had received her first suitor at 17, and the room in which she had refused a second one at 19. After which the doors of the rest of her life had begun to close around her. She walked into it now in ruby silk that had been cut in the last fashion of 1810. The dress was a year out of style, and 10 years too brave, and it caught the autumn light like the inside of a wound. Her hair had been pinned by Mrs. Beach, the housekeeper, who, in a flurry of restored loyalty, had wept twice, undone the work, and pinned it again. And her ink-stained fingers were hidden inside white gloves Mrs. Beach had also produced, from a drawer Helena had thought emptied a decade ago. Her father stood by the chimney-piece. Her mother stood at the long centre window. Her younger sister, Cordelia, 23, blonde, with the round, beautiful face that strangers always called angelic, and which Helena had loved without complication since the day Cordelia had been born, stood by the tea-table, holding a saucer with both hands. Cordelia's blue eyes were wide and not quite focused. She had clearly been told something on the stair, and she had clearly not yet decided whether to believe it. The Duke of Stanmore was already there. He had changed his coat. Black now, evening cut, even at noon, because he had ridden over from the inn and had nothing else with him, and a grey waistcoat. He stood by the second window. He had the folded drawing in his hand still. He had not put it down. Lord Halford was performing. "Your Grace," he said, in the warm, considered voice with which he had charmed 3 Lord Lieutenants and 4 borough seats out of better-bred men. He was 61. He had been very handsome at 30, and was still handsome at 60, in the cultivated way men who like mirrors stay handsome. He wore a peacock blue waistcoat, embroidered with thin gold leaves. His vanity had always been the one wall of him no daughter could climb. "We are honoured. My elder daughter has been, as you may have heard, long indisposed. We had not thought her well enough to receive guests today, but Lady Helena has insisted." Helena did not look at her father. She crossed to the tea-table. She took the second saucer from her sister's hand, gently, because Cordelia's hand was shaking. She set it down. She looked Cordelia full in the face for the first time in 8 years. "Cordy," she said. Cordelia's lower lip moved. "Sit," Helena said quietly. "It is going to be a long tea." Cordelia sat. Lady Halford, 53, narrow, exquisite in lavender silk, the kind of woman whose voice could cut glass without the courtesy of raising, moved from the window to the tea-table, "Helena, dearest," she said very lightly. "Your dress." "Yes," Helena said. "It is mine." 3 syllables. Helena did not look up. Edmund had not sat. He stood by the window with the drawing. His dark blue eyes were on her father. They had not yet moved. "Lord Halford," he said, and his voice was not warm now. It was not cold. It was the precise, considered voice of a man at a table in a banking house. "I've inspected the south wing this morning. The foundation reinforcement is excellent. The bay window proportion in the new conservatory is, frankly, better than anything I have seen in the catalogues this season. I have been congratulating myself for 18 months on having engaged the firm of Pell and Halford to oversee my Stanmore renovation as well. I am here today because we are halfway through the 3rd draft of the Stanmore East Wing, and I wished to thank the architect personally." He paused. He turned, very slightly, toward Helena. "I would like," he said, "to do that now." The teacup in Lady Halford's hand made one tiny, betraying sound against its saucer. Lord Halford recovered first. "Your Grace," he said, and the warmth was back, slightly thinner. "The firm is delighted. Mr. Pell will, of course, be delighted. He has done extraordinary—" "I'm not addressing Mr. Pell," Edmund said. "I'm addressing the woman who drew this." He held the folded paper up. A silence. Helena set her gloved hand against the edge of the tea table. The ruby silk caught the autumn light. She did not speak yet. She watched her father's face. She watched her father work, visibly because the work was now too heavy to hide. Through the calculations a man performs when an 8-year-old lie loses its scaffolding under his feet. Lord Halford did not look at his elder daughter. He looked at his guest. "Your Grace," he said, very carefully. "My daughter Helena has, from a girl, taken an interest in our family's properties. She has drawn, sketched, a young lady's hobby. The plans you hold are of course the work of the firm." Helena's white-gloved hand lifted from the tea table, slowly, deliberately, and she set it lightly on the back of the chair behind her sister. "Father," she said, "stop." Lord Halford turned to her then. The performance briefly cracked. There was, for one bare instant, the man who had locked her corridor door at midnight in November of 1818 and stood outside it telling her she was, from this hour, indisposed. That man had not gone anywhere. He had only been wearing better clothes. "Helena," he began. "You will not call me your daughter in this room," Helena said, "and use the same hour to call my work a young lady's hobby." Her voice was not raised, and it was the quiet, surgical voice she had been working on for 8 years, against an empty corridor. "His Grace asked you a direct question. Answer it." Lord Halford did not answer it. Edmund did. "I will answer it for you, my lord," he said softly. "The drawings are hers. The medal in your study is hers. The contract on my Stanmore desk is hers." A small breath. "And I have just spent 5 minutes in her room upstairs, with a broken window pane and a piece of darning thread, which is more access to her than your steward has had in 8 years. He turned, finally, to Helena. His dark blue eyes were very steady. "My lady," he said, "will you take a turn in the garden with me before tea is poured?" It was not a question. It was a courtesy at the edge of an order. Helena left her teacup untouched. She left her gloves on. She crossed to the door without looking at her parents, and held out a hand to her younger sister as she passed. Cordelia took her hand. The two of them went out together, with the Duke of Stanmore one half-step behind. The green drawing-room door closed. In the green drawing-room, Lady Halford sat down. Lord Halford did not. He stood at the chimney-piece in his peacock-blue waistcoat for a very long minute, with his hand over his mouth, like a man who has just recognized the smell of his own house on fire. The garden at Halford Manor in November had a colour Helena had forgotten. She had seen it from a window for 8 years, and a window flattens colour the way a copy flattens a drawing. From inside the window, the lawn had been grey-green, the box hedges had been black, the gravel had been white. From the gravel itself, with November light coming low across the lake at the bottom of the slope, and wood smoke moving sideways from the lodge chimney, the lawn was a colour halfway between bronze and amber. The box was a deep, oiled green, and the gravel under her own slippers was the warm, pale gold of bone china. She held Cordelia's hand for the first 30 paces. Then Cordelia, very gently, very deliberately, withdrew her own hand and said, in a voice that was not quite steady, "Helena, I think you should walk with His Grace. I am going to sit on the bench." Cordelia sat on the bench. Cordelia, Helena understood, was crying, quietly, with the back of her glove pressed to her mouth, and was trying to do it in a way that did not interrupt the morning. Helena bent, kissed her sister's hair, said, "5 minutes," and walked on with the Duke of Stanmore down the gravel path. They went past the box hedges, past the dovecote, past the cold, square stone basin, where as a child Helena had tested the displacement principle on a wooden boat she had built herself. The Duke did not speak for the length of the rose walk. His gloved hands were behind his back. The folded drawing was in his coat pocket now. Helena let him keep his silence. At the bottom of the rose walk, under the bare art of the trained pear tree, he stopped. "Lady Helena," he said, "I am going to ask you a series of questions. I am going to ask them clearly, because I do not yet know which answer changes the rest of my afternoon. I would be obliged if you would answer them with the same clarity." "Yes," Helena said. "In May of 1816, your father presented the south elevation of Stanmore East Wing to the Royal Society of Architects, under the name of Reginald Pell." "Yes." "That elevation was your work?" "Yes." "Mr. Pell received the Society Medal for that work?" "Yes." "And in the 18 months since I engaged the firm of Pell and Halford to design my Stanmore renovation, every drawing, every revision, every load calculation that I have signed, paid, and approved has come from your hand?" "Every one," Helena said. A silence. The Duke of Stanmore looked at the bare pear tree above their heads. He looked, Helena thought, like a man examining the load-bearing capacity of his own assumptions. "Lady Helena," he said, "has any portion of the money I have paid your father for those drawings reached you?" "Not 1 shilling." "Have you ever seen the medal?" "Once," Helena said, "through the keyhole of my father's study, in 1817, for 40 seconds, while my aunt was searching for me in the gallery." Edmund Cresswell closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, the dark blue had gone darker. "Lady Helena," he said, "forgive me. I have one more question, and then I will stop." "Ask." "Was it your idea, or was it mine, that I commissioned the Stanmore East Wing in this particular form?" Helena looked at him. "Your Grace," she said, "why do you ask?" "Because," Edmund said, "the brief I sent to your father in 1816 contained one specific clause. It asked for a wing whose load was carried on 5 interior columns, set on a foundation of compressed lime mortar bound with lead reinforcement. I had been told by every senior man at my club that this was an idle fancy, that no architect in England would design it, because it had not been done in England. Your father wrote back within 3 weeks with a complete proposal. The proposal was so accurate that by the end of the first month I had assumed I was speaking with the most ambitious mind in the field." A pause. "I was." Helena did not answer for a moment. "Your Grace," she said, "when I was 11, I read the Vitruvius in my father's library. When I was 13, I read Sir William Chambers. When I was 15, I read Soane on lime mortar." She breathed. "When I was 19, I stood in this garden, in the same place I am standing now, and refused a man my father had selected for me, and I told my father, to his face, in this garden, that I would design my own house, in my own time, on my own terms, and that I would not marry until I had done it. Her grey-green eyes did not move. He locked my corridor door 6 weeks later, and told the county I had taken ill of the smallpox, and I have not been beyond the East Wing since the November I was 19 years old. I am 27 now. I have spent 8 years in that room. I have read every architectural treatise the firm of Pell and Halford was sent. I redrew Mr. Pell's elevations in 1815 because they would have brought down the Stanmore Wall in 3 winters. I have been your architect. I have been your architect since the spring of 1817. You did not know it. I am sorry for that. A pause. I am not sorry I did the work. The Duke of Stanmore did not move. The November light caught his profile from one side, and the bare pear tree above him cast a fine pen-line shadow across his shoulder, and Helena found, with some annoyance, that her draftsman's eye was registering the angle of his jaw and the exact width of his mouth in a way that her draftsman's eye had no business doing. "My lady," he said. He took half a step closer. He did not touch her. "Did you enjoy any of it?" Helena did not understand the question for a second. Then she did. She thought of the column calculations she had done in the dim afternoons when her aunt was at the milliner. She thought of the smell of wet lime mortar she had never been allowed near, only described in books. She thought of the moment, in the spring of 1817, when she had drawn the curve of the Stanmore East Bay window in one continuous line, and had set down her pen and laughed aloud at the empty room, because it was right. "Your Grace," she said, "I enjoyed all of it." His mouth, that mouth that had not this morning been informed it was meant to be polite, moved. It did not smile yet. It did the thing a mouth does just before a smile, when a man is reorganizing the rest of his life. "Lady Helena," Edmund Cresswell said, "I'm going to take that tea with your father after all. I'm going to take it as if nothing had happened. I'm going to be charming. I'm going to ask after Mr. Pell. I'm going to accept the invitation to dinner on Friday." He paused. "I am asking your permission to lie in your father's drawing room for 90 minutes today. Because if I do not, your father will move the medal, the contract, and the most recent set of drawings from his study before nightfall. And you will lose the only evidence we will ever have." "Granted," Helena said immediately. "Will you be in your room when I come up the stair afterwards?" "I will be in my room with the corridor door open." "Good," he said. And then, more quietly, "Lady Helena, may I ask one further thing?" "Yes?" "The dress." Helena looked down at the ruby silk. It caught the November light and threw it back at her like a small, defiant fire. "It was made for me when I was 19, she said. "I have not worn it since. It has been folded inside an aunt's wardrobe for 8 years. "It was a fine dress 8 years ago," Edmund said, very slowly. "It is, this morning, the finest dress I have ever seen in this country. I beg you to wear it to dinner on Friday." "Your Grace," Helena said after a moment, "you may also call it brave." "I prefer to call it what it is." A pause. "Helena," he said, using her given name for the first time, very deliberately, the way a man tests a beam he is about to put weight on. "I will see you in an hour." He turned, walked back up the Rose Walk, paused at the bench to bow to Cordelia, and to extend his hand to her with a courtesy that made Cordelia's eyes fill again, and went into Halford Manor by the green drawing-room door. Helena stood under the bare pear tree for a moment longer. The November light was very low. Her ink-stained fingers were warm inside her white gloves. The ivory pencil stub against her ribs had not moved. She walked back up the Rose Walk, gathered her sister, and led her, quietly, calmly, as a woman who has been waiting 8 years for this morning to arrive leads anyone, back into the house. Lord Halford's study was the smallest, most carefully decorated room in Halford Manor, and the only one in which his elder daughter had not set foot since the November she was 19. It had a south window that faced the lake, Its walls were lined to the ceiling in rich, dark oak shelves, bought in 1797 and varnished twice every decade. The desk under the window was an ugly, expensive Sheraton with a green leather top scratched at the corners by a younger Lord Halford's letter opener, and untouched by any pen since Lord Halford had begun to publish, in his own name, his daughter's drawings. Above the chimney-piece, in a velvet-lined shadow box made by a London framer in 1816, hung the Bronze Society medal. Helena had not seen the medal except once, through a keyhole, for 40 seconds, in 1817. She crossed to it now, took it down off its nail with her white-gloved hand, examined the engraving on the back of the disc, and handed it to the Duke of Stanmore. "Your Grace," she said, "this is mine." It was an hour later. Tea in the green drawing-room had been performed, and survived. Lord Halford had been charming, almost touchingly so by the end, the way men become charming when they realize the room they are in has begun to slope. Lady Halford had recovered her composure with a thoroughness Helena's draftsman's eye almost admired. Cordelia had been quiet. The Duke of Stanmore had been impeccable. He had asked after Mr. Pell. He had accepted Friday. He had asked, with a courtesy so gentle it could have been mistaken for a friend's, whether he might inspect the firm's working records before he rode back to the inn. Strictly, of course, in the interest of professional curiosity, since the Stanmore East Wing had reached the column stage, and his land agent had requested clarification on a load calculation. Lord Halford had hesitated for one fraction of a heartbeat, and had agreed. Now they stood, the four of them, in his study. Lord Halford by the door, Lady Halford in the corridor outside, who would not enter. Helena by the chimney-piece. Edmund at the desk, with the green leather top open and the firm's account ledger laid flat in front of him. He turned the ledger toward Helena. "Lady Helena," he said, "would you be so good as to identify, in this column of receipts, any payments which have been made to you by your father?" "None," Helena said without looking. "He has paid for my mourning gloves, my linens, my coal, my supper, and 3 new pencils a year. He has paid for my sister's seasons. He has paid Mr. Pell £300 a quarter in retainer fees." She did not raise her voice. "In the column of disbursements at the back of the ledger," Edmund said, "I have just located my own draft of £700, dated June of the present year, against the 3rd revision of the Stanmore East Wing." He turned a page. "It was deposited into the firm's account on June the 11th. It was withdrawn, entirely, in cash, on June the 13th, by Lord Halford in person, against a private signature." He looked up. He was perfectly calm. "My lord, where did that money go?" "Your Grace," Lord Halford said. The performance was thin now. His handsome face had lost its peacock pleasure. "There were obligations." "Where did the money go?" Helena spoke before her father could. "It went into my younger sister's marriage settlement," she said. "He has been increasing it across 2 years. He intends Mr. Pell to marry her in the spring. The settlement is almost £6,000 now. My father has been building it out of my drawings since the spring of 1817. She had known it for 9 days. She had read the second contract in the same 40-second interval in which she had read the first. She did not look at her father as she said it. She looked at Cordelia, who had drifted into the doorway behind her mother and was standing with one hand against the frame. Cordelia made a small, soft sound. "Cordy," Helena said, "I am sorry." "You did not do this," Cordelia whispered. "No. He did this." "Yes." Lord Halford raised one hand. "Cordelia." "Father," Cordelia said. She had a sweet, high voice that had never been used in anger by anyone in this house. She used it now. "Did you tell Mr. Pell I was not yet engaged?" Lord Halford did not answer. "Did you tell Mr. Pell," Cordelia said again, very steadily, "that I would have him in the spring?" "My dear." "I will not have him," Cordelia said. "I will not have him in the spring or in any spring. I do not know him. I have danced with him 3 times. I do not like the way he laughs at the children at the gate. She looked at Helena. Her blue eyes were very wide. I did not know about Helena. I did not know what was happening on the other side of my corridor wall. I did not know about the medal. I did not know about Mr. Pell. Her voice cracked, finally, only on the next word. Father, I did not know. Cordy, Helena said softly, come stand beside me. Cordelia stepped past her mother, who did not move, and crossed the study to her sister. She put her hand into Helena's white-gloved hand. The 2 sisters stood at the chimney-piece together. The Duke of Stanmore closed the ledger. My lord, he said, I will leave Halford Manor before dark today. I will return on Friday for dinner, as agreed. I would be obliged if, between this hour and Friday, you make no decisions concerning the medal, the Stanmore contract, the firm's records, or your elder daughter's residence. A breath. I am not, yet, making accusations. I am taking tea in your green drawing room. I am having dinner on Friday. I am riding back to the inn with 2 of your daughter's company in my pocket and a folded drawing in my coat. If anything in this study moves between now and Friday, however, I will not be having dinner. I will be returning with 2 solicitors and a justice of the peace. Are we understood? Lord Halford had gone the colour of bone china. Your Grace, are we understood? Yes. Good, Edmund said. He bowed to Lady Halford, who had not moved from the corridor. He bowed more deeply to Cordelia. He bowed most deeply to Helena. My lady, he said. My lady. My lady. He walked out of the study. In the corridor, Lady Halford did not turn her head as he passed her. She did not turn it as her own daughters passed her either. Helena and Cordelia walked the length of the long oak passage and out into the November garden again, hand in hand. And behind them, the green drawing-room door stayed open, and the study door stayed open, and the corridor of the east wing stayed open. And the November light moved slowly across the gravel toward the Rose Walk, where Cordelia would, that afternoon, sit on the same bench and weep in her sister's lap for an hour and a half without interruption. It was the first time in 8 years no door at Halford Manor had been locked between them. Helena did not return to the East Wing room that afternoon. She walked Cordelia slowly all the way around the lake. They stopped at the boathouse. They stopped at the cold, square stone basin, where a 6-year-old Helena had floated her wooden boat. They stopped at the pear tree under which Helena had told her father, at 19, that she would marry no man until she had built her own house. By the time the November light had gone the colour of cooled iron, Cordelia had told Helena every gossip page detail of the last 8 years that Helena had not been allowed to read, and Helena had told Cordelia 3 architectural treatises in plain English, while Cordelia laughed for the first time since the morning. They were both crying a little. Cordelia, in particular, kept stopping at intervals to put her gloved hand against her own cheek, as if to check that the world she was walking through was the same world she had woken up in. When they came back across the lawn, the housekeeper, Mrs. Beach, was waiting at the south door with a candle and a face that contained more decisions in it than her face had contained in 8 years. Lady Helena, she said, His Grace's man brought a parcel for you from the inn. I have laid it on the table in the still room because I did not know which room is yours now. Helena considered for a moment. Mrs. Beach, she said, from this hour, my room is the room I left this morning. The corridor stays unlocked. I will sleep there tonight. A pause. Have my drawing table moved into the small library by Wednesday. Yes, my lady. And Mrs. Beach? Yes, my lady. Thank you for pinning my hair. The housekeeper's mouth folded inward and held. My lady, she said. Mr. Reginald Pell, of the firm of Pell and Halford, arrived at Halford Manor on Friday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 2 hours earlier than he had been expected, in a hired chaise from London. He was 34. He was beautiful in the precise, dimpled, almost feminine way that some men carry into their middle 30s, without realizing it has begun to make them look perpetually unfinished. He wore a fawn coat, fawn breeches, an apricot waistcoat that was slightly too pale for his complexion, and a quantity of cologne that made the parlour cat sneeze when he passed. Cordelia, in the gallery, watched him come up the gravel from the second window. "Helena," she whispered. "He is not what I remembered." "He is exactly what you remembered," Helena said. "You have only stopped lying to yourself about what he is." Cordelia made a small, complicated sound that was half laugh, half nausea. The dinner had been arranged for 6. Mr. Pell, at 4, was unannounced. He had not ridden ahead. He had clearly come early because he had been told something, by an underfootman in the firm's London office, perhaps, or by Lord Halford's hurried express, or by some thread of gossip that had crossed the road faster than either party had hoped. He had come early to manage. Helena watched him cross the hall with one hand to his lapel. She had, in 8 years, never been in the same room with him. She had only watched him from the gallery when he came to dine, and had read his letters when her father left them out, and had redrawn his elevations in a private fury at her drawing table. And once, in the spring of 1816, had heard him laugh through the floorboards while accepting a glass of port from her father, and felt something in her chest go quiet, and bright, and dangerous. She came down the stair to meet him. She wore the ruby silk again. She had decided. She had also, at her own insistence, and with Mrs. Beech's help, removed the white gloves. The ink stains on her fingers were now visible. She wanted them visible. Mr. Pell had been welcomed into the green drawing room. Lord Halford, who looked as if he had not slept for 3 nights, and who had begun the morning with a half glass of brandy in his coffee, was performing again. But the performance had developed a tremor that even a man as inattentive as Mr. Pell could feel without naming. Mr. Pell turned as Helena entered. He had clearly been told by her father, that morning in a hurried letter, that Lady Helena was no longer indisposed, that there had been a misunderstanding, that she would dine that evening. He had clearly not been told, because Lord Halford had not wished to admit it in writing, what specific shape the misunderstanding had taken. Mr. Pell smiled. "Lady Helena," he said warmly, "I have heard so much." "Yes," Helena said, "I have heard so much of you also." He laughed, easily, looking around the room for a witness. "You design," he said. "Your father has often spoken of your charming little hobby. I should like, before dinner, to see your sketchbook. I am told you have an eye." The Duke of Stanmore, who had been standing by the window in black evening cut and grey waistcoat for 40 seconds longer than Mr. Pell had realized, did not move. Helena did not raise her voice. She did not move closer to Mr. Pell. She inclined her head a fraction. "Mr. Pell," she said, "may I ask you 7 questions before dinner?" "My dear lady, of course." "Mr. Pell," Helena said, "why is the load calculation on the south elevation of Stanmore East Wing 14 tons higher than the original brief required?" Mr. Pell's smile did not move, but his eyes did. They flicked, briefly, to Lord Halford. Lord Halford did not return the glance. "I beg your pardon?" "Your second question," Helena said. "Why does the foundation specification call for compressed lime mortar bound with lead reinforcement, when the firm of Pell and Halford has, by the firm's own catalogue, never executed a lead-bound mortar in the field?" Silence. "Your third question. Where does the Vitruvius proportion of your conservatory bay window appear in any of your published works prior to 1815? Mr. Pell opened his mouth. "Your fourth question," Helena said. "When the Society Medal was conferred upon you in October of 1816, what specifically were you asked, by Sir John Soane, about the deflection coefficient of an iron-tied beam over a 6-foot span? I was watching your reply through the keyhole of my father's study. I would like to hear it again." Lord Halford set his glass down so hard the table sang. "Your fifth question. Where is your apprentice book?" Mr. Pell's mouth had begun to move without producing words. Your sixth question. When my father wrote to you in May of last year, proposing your marriage to my younger sister Cordelia, you replied in writing that you were honored. The letter is in this house. I have read it. Do you wish to retract it now, in this room, in front of the Duke of Stanmore, who has just spent 4 days in London with his solicitor reviewing the firm's accounts? Or shall I ask my seventh question? A silence. The kind of silence in which Mr. Pell appeared to age 4 years between one heartbeat and the next. Lady Helena, he said, I am sure we may discuss your seventh question, Helena said quietly. How do you sleep? Mr. Pell did not answer that one either. Cordelia, in the doorway, in white muslin and a deep rose sash, because Helena had told her to wear something brave that evening, lifted her chin slightly and crossed to her father. Father, Cordelia said, Mr. Pell will not be staying for dinner. Lord Halford had no breath left in him to argue. The Duke of Stanmore, by the window, did not smile. He did not need to. He nodded very slightly to Helena, the way a man at the end of a long calculation nods at the column that has come right. Mr. Pell was shown to the door. His chaise, driven by a tired horse and a tireder driver, went back down the gravel toward London at 20 minutes past 4 in the afternoon, with a letter from Lord Halford in his pocket, containing £200, and a request that Mr. Pell pursue his architectural ambitions henceforth in another country. But that was the spring. That was not yet. The following morning, very early, before Halford had risen and before the house had woken into its strained, careful new silence, the Duke of Stanmore sent his land agent's curricle to the front of the house with a single horse. He stepped down. He came up the gravel in dust-streaked work clothes, leather riding breeches, a plain dark coat over an open shirt, no neckcloth, and stood under Helena's east wing window with his hands clasped behind his back. He did not call up. He had not needed to. Helena was already at the casement. She was already dressed. She wore an indigo riding habit that Mrs. Beach had located in a trunk in the old still room, that had been Lady Halford's at 30, that Helena had not been permitted to wear for any of her seasons, because her mother had felt the colour was too forward for an unmarried girl of Helena's complexion. It fit her now as if it had been made for her. The habit's cuffs were trimmed in fine black braid. Her hair was severely up. The ivory pencil stub was inside the right cuff. She had 2 of them now. The Duke of Stanmore looked up. My lady, he said, I have brought you a horse. Your Grace. He is called Augustus. He is 15 hands. He will not throw you. I am riding his cousin. A pause. I would be obliged if you would come down. There is a place I would like you to see today, before my solicitor arrives at Halford on Monday. I would like to show it to you in the daylight. Helena had not been on a horse in 8 years. She came down anyway. Augustus was a square, mild bay, with gentle eyes and a thoughtful mouth, and Helena's hands remembered, against her will and entirely without permission from her brain, exactly what to do with the reins. Mrs. Beach stood at the south door with a thermos of tea and an expression of the most unbecoming pride. Cordelia, in a dressing gown, watched from the gallery window and waved with both hands. Helena and the Duke of Stanmore rode out of Halford Gates at 20 past 7 in the morning and turned west. Stanmore lay 7 miles west by the post road. They did not take the post road. The Duke turned them down a lane that ran through the bare pollarded oaks of the Halford Common, then up across the chalk ridge that divided the Halford estate from the Stanmore lands. The November sky was clear, very pale, with a small wind off the downs. The horse's breath made narrow white plumes. Helena had not known, in 8 years of windowed observation, that the world had quite this much air in it. She did not speak for the first 3 miles. The Duke of Stanmore, riding at her left, did not speak either. He let her have the first 3 miles. At the top of the chalk ridge, he reined in. He pointed. Lady Helena, he said. Stanmore. It was a long, low country house in honey-coloured stone, with a slate roof going dark with age, set in a fold of the downs at the head of a beech avenue. The west wing was the original Tudor block. The central range was Georgian. The south wing, Helena could see it now in the morning light, was a fine, restrained late Georgian addition, restored with care. The east wing was scaffolded. The east wing was scaffolded in exactly the proportions Helena had drawn in the spring of 1817. She sat on Augustus and looked at it. She had drawn it twice, 3 times, 20 times. She had drawn the elevation in detail, the plan in detail, the proportion of the window bays in detail. She had calculated the load. She had specified the lime mortar. She had argued with herself about the placement of the third interior column for 2 days in the summer of 1817, and finally moved it 9 inches west because of a geometry of light that she had only seen in a sewn plate. She had never seen it built. "Your Grace," Helena said. Her voice was steady. Her hands on the reins were not. "My lady." "It is exactly correct." "Yes," Edmund said. "The third column is in the right place." "Yes." "The bay window catches the south light at," she calculated, 2 minutes before noon all year except midsummer." "At 1 minute before noon today," Edmund said, allowing for the November sun. "I had my land agent measure it last week." Helena's eyes went briefly hot. She did not let it go further than that. She blinked once, hard, and reset. "Your Grace," she said, "take me down to it." He did. They rode down the long beech avenue, where the leaves had gone the colour of old gold, and lay across the gravel a hand thick. The avenue ended at a small gate that opened onto a paved court, and in the paved court were stacks of dressed stone, 2 carpenter's frames, a brazier, 3 site labourers eating bread and cold ham, and a Stanmore foreman called Mr. Dixon, who was 60, square-shouldered, and who wore a tarred apron with 7 pencils in the breast pocket. Mr. Dixon lifted his cap. "Your Grace." "Dixon, this is Lady Helena Halford. Lady Helena is the architect." Mr. Dixon took the cap off entirely. He had been told 2 nights ago, by a quiet visit from his employer, that the firm of Pell and Halford had made an irregularity in the matter of attribution, and that the third revision of the East Wing, which Mr. Dixon and his men had, in confidence, admired more than any drawing the firm had previously sent them, had not, after all, been the work of Mr. Pell. Mr. Dixon had been told who it had been the work of. Mr. Dixon had taken this news with a very straight back, had thought about it overnight, and had, the next morning, before the men came on site, written 6 lines in his own hand on a board nailed above the foreman's desk. "Architect's office. No entry except by appointment. Lady H. Halford." Helena saw the board now. Mr. Dixon did not draw her attention to it. He let her find it on her own. He showed her the foundation. He showed her the column placements. He showed her the lime mortar pit, where the first run of compressed lime mortar bound with lead reinforcement was curing under wet sacking. He showed her the 3 carpenters who had cut the bay window proportion to her drawing and who, when she walked through, set down their tools and bowed in a way that none of them had done for any visiting peer in their lives. Helena made 1 circuit of the site with her hands behind her back. She paused at the 3rd column footing. She crouched. She put her bare, ungloved palm against the padstone. Cold, faintly damp, smelling of mineral, and her draftsman's eye registered, with a small, clean joy that she had not felt in 8 years, that the angle of bearing was true to a ½ degree. She stood up. She turned to the foreman. "Mr. Dixon," she said, "there is a ½ inch error on the inner sill of the western bay. My drawing reads 3 feet 4 inches from the column. You have it at 3 feet 4½ We will leave it. The error increases the natural light at the breakfast hour by a measurable amount. I would like to amend the drawing accordingly." "Yes, my lady." "Mr. Dixon." "Yes, my lady." "The board above your desk." Yes, my lady. Thank you. My lady, said Mr. Dixon, and he put his cap back on with unusual difficulty, because his eyes had not for some reason been entirely working since she had stepped down from her horse. Edmund, behind her, watched all of this without speaking. When the circuit was done, when Mr. Dixon had gone back to the men, when the carpenters were back at their saws, the Duke of Stanmore offered Helena his arm, a very simple, courteous offer of an arm, and she took it. They walked the length of the west elevation together. The November sun was higher now. The honey-coloured stone of the original block warmed under the light. The wind off the downs had dropped. Lady Helena, Edmund said, very quietly, I have one further thing to show you today. It is up the slope behind the West Walk. It is, technically, not part of the renovation. It is private. I would like you to come. Your Grace. Yes. I will come. He led her up the West Walk, past a low ha-ha, up the slope behind, into a small beech grove. At the top of the grove there was a folly, a 6-sided stone shelter, 8 feet high at the wall, 12 feet at the roof peak, covered in winter ivy, half collapsed at one corner. It had been built, he told her, in 1761 by his great-grandfather, and abandoned in 1798 after a storm took the roof. It had stood half-roofless ever since. He pushed the small wooden door open. Inside, the floor was bare flagstone. The walls were dry. The half-fallen roof had been temporarily covered, in the last fortnight, by a tarpaulin nailed over the open beams. In the centre of the floor stood a long oak drawing table, planed flat, with 2 stools and a single lamp. Your Grace, Helena said. Lady Helena. What is this? Your office, Edmund said. If you would consent to take it. I had it cleared on Monday. The roof will be repaired in March, properly, by you, to your specification. Until then there is the tarpaulin and the lamp. It is mine. It is, by the boundary line, on my land. It is 1 mile and 3/4 from your father's gate, by the public footpath. You may come to it at any hour. I will not enter without your permission. He paused. He turned the small key in the door and laid it in her palm. My lady, he said, I will not pretend the offer is impersonal. I am offering you, among other things, the only thing I believe you have asked the world for since you were 19 years old. A place to draw, in the daylight, that no one can lock. The rest of the offer will be made later, in a different room, in a more proper way. This is the first part, because you should not have to wait for the rest of it. Will you accept it? Helena Halford stood in the cold flagstone shelter on the slope above Stanmore East Wing, with the small key warm in her palm, and her dark auburn hair loose at the temple, where the wind had taken it, and the indigo riding habit a little dust-streaked at the cuff. And she did not weep. She had not wept in 8 years. She was not going to weep in front of a tarpaulin. She held the key. Your Grace, she said. I accept. Edmund Cresswell smiled then, for the first time since the morning he had stood under her broken casement, and the smile was unhurried and warm, and entirely unlike the smile of a man who had ever been told he was a duke. Helena, he said, using her given name for the second time. Welcome to Wind's End. That afternoon, on the long oak drawing table in the half-roofed folly above Stanmore East Wing, the Duke of Stanmore set down a leather portfolio, 10 inches deep, tied with a black ribbon, and untied it. He did not open it. He waited. Lady Helena, he said, before you look in this folio, I am going to tell you what is in it, so that the surprise does not knock you down sideways while we are standing alone on a hillside with one tarpaulin between us and the rain. Your Grace, it is a folio of London drawings. I have spent the last 4 days in London with my solicitor and one trusted clerk. We have visited 3 private clients of the firm of Pell and Halford, and 4 private collectors. Between them, your father and Mr. Pell have, since 1815, sold or attributed 31 architectural works under the joint name of the firm. I have brought the original drawings, the plans, the elevations, the working sketches, of 14 of those 31. The other 17 are believed lost, sold abroad, or in private hands beyond reach for the present. Of the 14, he paused, I am told all of them are yours. Helena did not speak for a moment.
Your Grace, she said. Show me one. Anyone. Begin at the top.
He untied the folio. He laid the topmost drawing flat on the oak table. It was a north elevation of a small stone library, with 3 round-headed windows and a slate and tile patterned roof, drawn in graphite and red chalk, on a sheet of paper Helena had bought herself in 1815 and had never seen again. She put her hand flat on it. She did not pick it up.
This is for Lord Winchcombe in Suffolk, she said quietly. I drew it in the spring of 1815. It was the first commission my father took from the firm. He told me it was for my own practice. He told me I should draw it as if it were real. He gave me 3 weeks. He paid me £4 out of my own quarter's pin money. He took it down to London on the night coach in May.
A breath.
I had not seen it since.
It was built in 1816, Edmund said quietly. Lord Winchcombe's great-aunt has been reading her letters in it every morning for the past 2 winters. She is reported to be very fond of the morning light through the easternmost window.
I am glad,
Helena said. She looked at her hand. She had drawn the easternmost window twice, first 3 feet from the corner, then 2 feet 10, because she had wanted the morning light to land on the breakfast table, not the floor.
Show me the next, she said.
He showed her the next, and the next, and the next. By the 7th drawing, a small Methodist chapel near Norwich, Helena had stopped breathing easily. By the 10th, she had sat down on the oak stool. By the 13th, she had her hand flat on the table because she did not entirely trust her own legs. The 14th drawing was the drawing of a private library, panelled in oak, lit by a single round skylight, with one wall given over entirely to a built-in desk. Helena had drawn it for herself when she was 20. She had drawn it in the room her father later locked. She had labeled the desk, Architect's Desk, Lady H. Halford. Her father had taken the drawing out of her room when she was 21, told her it was to be framed for her, and never returned it. It had been built, her own private library, her own desk, by Lord Asquith of Devon in the spring of 1818, on the basis of an unsigned drawing presented to him by Lord Halford as an exemplar of the firm's interior craft. Helena looked at her own desk on the page. She was sitting on the wooden stool, with her ink-stained fingers spread on the oak table, and she was not crying, and she was not speaking, and the tarpaulin above her head moved very slightly in the wind off the downs. Helena, Edmund said, I am going to step outside. The wind is coming up. I will be very near. I will be 1 step beyond the door. Take whatever time you need. He stepped out. He shut the small wooden door behind him. He stood with his back to it, and his hands behind his back, and his dark blue eyes on the long, bare line of the November downs. And he did not turn for 40 minutes. Inside the Folly, Lady Helena Halford put her ink-stained palms flat on the oak drawing table beside the picture of her own private library, and she made one sound. Small, low, an exhale rather than a cry, and she put her forehead down on the cool wood for 1 minute, and then she sat back up, and she dried her cheeks against the back of her own wrist, where there were no gloves to hide it, and she opened the leather pencil case the Duke of Stanmore had laid beside the folio, and she began to write, carefully, in steady draftsman's hand, on the back of the drawing of her own private library. Architect of Record, Lady Helena Halford. Drawn 1814. Built 1818. Owner of record at present, Lord Asquith of Devon. Status, pending. She wrote the same line on the back of the other 13 drawings, taking her time, signing her name in full at the bottom of each, and beneath her signature, in a smaller hand, the date. When she had finished, she went to the door, opened it from the inside and said, "Your Grace, you may come in." He came in. The November light through the open door fell across her ink-stained, ungloved hands and across the 14 signed drawings on the long oak table. Edmund Cresswell stopped one step inside the room. "My lady," he said, "Your Grace, I am very sorry for what was done to you." "Yes." A pause. "And I am very glad," he said quietly, "to have ridden into the gravel under your window at the precise hour I did." Helena looked at him steadily across the long oak table. The folly walls were cold. The tarpaulin moved. The November light caught the curve of her cheekbone where the tear had dried. Her ink-stained fingers were still flat on the topmost drawing. "Your Grace," she said, "so am I." The Countess of Halford waited until Tuesday morning to attempt her gambit. Helena, at the foot of the table in her indigo riding habit, set down her teacup and looked at her mother across 3 feet of polished mahogany. "Mother," she said pleasantly, "how thoughtful of you. At what hour does Dr. Mayhew arrive?" "At noon, my dear." "Excellent. I will receive him in the green drawing-room. Cordelia, will you sit with me? His Grace, will you join us also? Mrs. Beach, would you be so kind as to set out the tea things and to send to the inn for Dr. Eaglefield, who attended Lord Halford's gout in the summer?" "Yes, my lady." Lady Halford's lavender silk did not move. Her face, Helena thought, with a small, private satisfaction, did. The skin around her mother's mouth tightened by exactly the amount of skin that tightens when a woman realizes that the morning's plan has acquired witnesses. The Duke of Stanmore, who had, since Sunday, taken rooms at the inn and ridden over to Halford each morning to read estate papers in the small library beside Helena's drawing table, on the courteous fiction that he was inspecting Lord Halford's stewardship of his own land, set down his coffee. "Madam," he said gently to the Countess, "I should like nothing better." Dr. Mayhew of Oxford arrived at 10 minutes past noon. He was 63. He had been celebrated in 1810 for the diagnosis of neurasthenic deterioration in unmarried daughters of the gentry, a diagnosis which conveniently required prolonged seclusion, a low diet, and the discontinuation of any reading more strenuous than a prayer book. He had visited Helena once in November of 1810 at her father's invitation. He had pronounced her tendency to architectural treatises morbid. He had recommended that her library be emptied. He had been paid 80 guineas. He had not seen her since. He came into the green drawing-room behind Lady Halford with the soft, regretful smile of a man who is very accustomed to being asked to deliver sad news to ladies of breeding. He bowed to Helena. He took her white-gloved hand. He sat beside her on the green silk settee and inquired after her sleep. "Dr. Mayhew," Helena said, "it is good to see you again. You will recall that you last saw me when I was 19, in a state which you described in writing to my father as morbid. The library to which you referred was, on your specific recommendation, removed from my room within 6 weeks. The recommendation was acted upon by my father in November of 1810. I have, since that month, slept in the same room, taken the same low diet, and read no books more strenuous than a prayer book, at least not any books which my mother was permitted to know I was reading." She paused. "I am 27. Dr. Mayhew's regretful smile flickered. "Yes, dear lady, quite so." "Dr. Mayhew," Helena said, "I would like you to look at this." She held out, from the small writing desk beside her, her own draft of the Stanmore East Wing South Elevation, 3rd revision, signed in her hand at the corner, dated June of 1818. Dr. Mayhew, who knew nothing about architecture and a great deal about the politics of the county, took it because he could not refuse a young lady who had handed him a paper. He looked at it. He did not understand it. "This is the south elevation of the Stanmore East Wing," Helena said. "I drew it in June. The wing is now under construction. His Grace has paid the firm of Pell and Halford £2,300 for it. The construction has reached the column stage."
A man called Mr. Reginald Pell submitted an earlier version of the same drawing to the Royal Society of Architects in 1816 under his own name, and was awarded a society medal for it. The medal hung above my father's chimney-piece for 2 years. The society now believes the medal to have been awarded in error. I have a letter to that effect. She lifted it, and its broken seal, off the desk. From the secretary of the society, dated yesterday. Dr. Mayhew's regretful smile had gone entirely. Dr. Mayhew, Helena said quietly. If you wish to declare me morbid this morning, you may do so. You may declare me anything you like. You may write any diagnosis you wish on any sheet of any paper that you and my mother have agreed should bear it. You may take any quantity of guineas in exchange. I will not stop you. I will only ask you to deliver the diagnosis publicly, in the presence of Dr. Eaglefield from the village, who is at this moment riding up the gravel. She did not look at the window. She had seen the carriage from the corner of her eye 30 seconds ago. And the Duke of Stanmore, who has been in this room for the past 4 minutes, and who is the patron of the building you have just declined to recognize as my work. After which, you may explain to me, in the presence of those gentlemen, precisely on what grounds the diagnosis rests. And you may explain, also, why you accepted 80 guineas in 1810 to apply it to me without asking me a single question. Dr. Mayhew had begun to perspire above his collar. He looked once at Lady Halford, and Lady Halford did not look back at him. He set down the drawing. He stood up. He took his hat off the hall table and his coat off Mrs. Beech's arm, and walked, in considerable haste, back to his hired chaise, and at 20 minutes to 1 in the afternoon, Dr. Mayhew was on the post road back to Oxford, and at 1 in the afternoon, Dr. Eaglefield, from the village, was being shown into the green drawing-room by Mrs. Beech, where he found Lady Helena Halford in extraordinary spirits, the Duke of Stanmore in extraordinary good humour, Lady Cordelia Halford laughing aloud for the first time in the green drawing-room since 1810, and Lady Halford no longer present. Dr. Eaglefield, who was a kind man and who had liked Lord Halford's gout substantially less than Lord Halford's elder daughter's eyes, joined them for tea. He charged nothing for the visit. He stayed for an hour. Lady Halford retired upstairs with a headache that was not feigned and did not come down for the rest of the day. 2 days after Dr. Mayhew's chaise had vanished down the post road to Oxford, the Duke of Stanmore and Lady Helena Halford sat on opposite sides of the long oak table in the small library beside Helena's old room, and they revised the Stanmore East Wing. Helena had drawn the 3rd revision in the spring. The 3rd revision had, on Mr. Dixon's site, encountered 3 problems that Helena had not been able to anticipate from a windowed room. The slope of the ground at the west corner ran half a foot lower than the survey claimed. A buried Saxon foundation under the east column had been struck. A young oak on the south boundary that had not been thought to matter had developed, since the spring, into a creature whose root system threatened the 2nd column footing. The 4th revision was Helena's response to the world. It was the first revision she had ever drawn in the same room as the man who would build it. They had begun at 8 in the morning. By 10, 3 sheets had been pinned to a board. By 11, Helena had moved the 2nd column 9 inches west, and Edmund had measured, on the floor of the library with a folded length of string, the corresponding sweep of light. By noon they had agreed, with very little dispute and a great deal of mutual interest, that the Saxon foundation under the east column should be left where it was, that the east column should rest, by intention, on stone laid by men whose names had been forgotten for 1,000 years, because the placement was beautiful, and because Helena had never in her life had the chance to draw a column that had a story under it. By 1 in the afternoon, they had run out of biscuits. By 2, Helena's ink-stained right hand and Edmund's chisel-scarred left thumb had touched, once, briefly, over the corner of the same drawing, while she was steadying the corner against a draught from the door and he was correcting a measurement. Neither of them had moved their hands away for a measurable interval. After it, neither of them mentioned it. They worked on. Helena drew. Edmund made small, considered notes on the verso.
The November light moved across the oak floor. Mrs. Beach brought more biscuits and shortbread and another pot of tea and went out very quietly. Cordelia, who had been reading on the window seat, set her book down at one point, quietly, looking at neither of them, and went away to leave them alone, and neither of them noticed. At 3, Helena set down her pen. "Your Grace," she said, "look at the south elevation." He looked. "Yes." "Look at the bay window." "Yes." "It is not the bay window I drew in 1817. "No." "It has changed." "It has. Why has it changed?" Edmund considered for a moment. "Because," he said quietly, "in 1817, when you drew it from inside a locked room. You drew the most beautiful bay window you could imagine, given that you had not, for 7 years, been allowed to stand in any window unsupervised. You drew a window that looked out. This morning," he lifted his pencil, set it on the redrawn line, "you drew a window that lets people in." Helena did not look at the drawing. She looked at him. The November afternoon light through the small library's south window was very low. Her ink-stained fingers were resting flat on the table, 6 inches from his ink-stained fingers. The tip of her little finger was a fraction of an inch from his thumb. The chisel scar along his thumb joint was clearly visible. "Your Grace," she said. "Helena. You have called me Helena 3 times now." "I have." "You should perhaps stop." A very small pause. "Why?" "Because," Helena said, in the steady, unhurried voice she had been working on for 8 years, "if you continue to call me Helena, in this light, in this room, with our hands 6 inches apart, I will be unable to draw the north elevation tomorrow with any accuracy. I have been, for the past 4 hours, drawing extremely well. I should like to keep drawing well." Edmund Cresswell looked at her steadily for the longest moment of the afternoon. Then, very deliberately, he moved his hand back from hers. 1/2 inch. Only 1/2 inch. Only enough for the air between their hands to widen. And he set the pencil down beside the inkstand. He did not look away from her face. "My lady," he said. "My apologies. I will call you Lady Helena tomorrow morning." "Thank you." "On the day the north elevation is finished," he said, "I will ask your permission to use your given name again. I will ask it formally, in a room with witnesses." "Your Grace," Helena said, after a pause, "that is acceptable." "Tomorrow at 8, Edmund said. "Tomorrow at 8. He left the library. He left Halford. He rode back to the inn. Helena sat at the long oak table for a quarter of an hour in the dimming November light, with her ink-stained palm flat against the place where his hand had been. And then she pulled the 4th revision south elevation toward her, and she added, in very small graphite, the figure of a tall, broad-shouldered man standing inside the bay window, his face turned away, looking out toward the downs. She rubbed it out before she went up to dress for dinner. But she had drawn it. Cordelia Halford made her decision on Wednesday morning. She came into Helena's room at 7:20, in a dressing gown the color of clotted cream, with her blonde hair loose down her back, and she sat on the edge of Helena's bed and she said, without preamble, "Helena, I am leaving Halford." Helena, who had been awake for 40 minutes already, set down her teacup. "I am going to have a season in Bath," Cordelia said. "An unsupervised season. With my aunt. Aunt Frances says she is going to teach me to read 4 kinds of book that Mother has told me are for clever people. Aunt Frances says I am clever enough." A pause. "I am, actually. Father told me I was not. Aunt Frances says he is wrong. I think he is wrong as well." A breath. "I want to go, Helena. I want to go this week. I will be back at Christmas. I want to come back to you, in this house, in your house, because this is your house, Helena. You understand that, do you not? This is your house.
Our father has been ruining it as a steward ruins a property. I want to come back here at Christmas to you." "Helena," she said, "he is in love with you." "He is. He is in love with you. He does not know it yet. He will know it in 3 weeks, and then he will be very surprised." "I am going to Bath," Cordelia said. "And you are going to draw buildings.
"And you are going to marry the Duke of Stanmore, and father is going to live in this house with mother for the rest of his life, with the green drawing room door closed. And you are going to give me a niece, and call her Frances. I have given the matter considerable thought." She drew back. Her blue eyes were perfectly clear. "It is the correct outcome." She left Halford on Friday morning at 11 o'clock in her aunt's brougham, with a great quantity of light luggage and 3 of Helena's drawings in a leather case that she had begged for the journey. And she did not look back at the green drawing-room window, because Lord Halford was at it, watching her go. And Cordelia did not wish to know what his face was doing. The carriage went down the gravel and turned out of the gates and onto the post road for Bath, and Halford Manor settled, very quietly, into a new shape behind it. The county dinner and Lady Wexton's of Wexton House, 6 miles east of Halford on the post road to Reading, fell on the 2nd Tuesday of December, and Lady Wexton, who was 60, who was the sharpest county hostess between Oxford and London, and who had liked Lady Helena Halford as a girl of 17, and had not seen her since she was 19, had written personally to Helena to insist upon her attendance. "My dear child," her letter ran, "I have heard everything. I am too old to disguise the fact that I have heard everything. You will dine with me on the 2nd Tuesday in December. You will sit on my right. The Duke of Stanmore will sit on my left. Aunt Matilda Halford will sit at the far end of the table, beside the elderly bishop's chaplain, where she will be able to do herself the least damage. Wear what you like, my dear, but for the sake of an old woman who has watched the county for 40 years, please come in something unforgettable. Wexton." Helena went in the ruby silk. Helena had come alone in the Halford carriage. The Duke of Stanmore had been told he would meet her at Wexton House. He met her at the foot of the stair. He had ridden over from his inn. He was in black evening cut and a dark grey waistcoat. His dark blue eyes registered the bronze medal at her throat, and held there for a beat longer than was decent. "Lady Helena," he said. "Your Grace, you are wearing the medal." "I am." "You are wearing it tonight." "I am." "My lady," he said, "I have been trying to think since this afternoon how I might convey to you that you have done me an honour by allowing me to come up the stair behind you tonight, and I have not yet found the language." "Your Grace," Helena said, looking up at him, "the language is unnecessary. The language is, in fact, already on the page upstairs in my drawing room. The 4th revision of the south elevation has, since this morning, contained a single small graphite figure in the bay window. The figure has dark blue eyes, a chisel scar on the left thumb, and a habit of standing 1/2 step closer to a drawing than is structurally necessary. I had intended to rub it out. I have, this evening, decided to leave it." She paused. "Take me up the stair, Your Grace." He took her up the stair. Lady Wexton met them at the drawing-room door. Lady Wexton was 4 feet 11, weighed 8 stone, wore black grosgrain, had the bones of a falcon, and had not been outmaneuvered at her own dinner table since 1791. She kissed Helena once on each cheek. She took Helena's hand. She turned Helena into the drawing-room. She raised her own thin, quiet, perfectly pitched voice. "Lady Helena Halford," Lady Wexton said, "architect of record of Stanmore East Wing, of Winchcombe Library, of Asquith's private interior at Devon, and of the new Methodist chapel at Norwich. Recipient, at last, of the bronze medal of the Royal Society of Architects, which she is wearing tonight, as is correct, at her throat." The drawing-room, 24 guests, all the senior families of the county, the bishop's chaplain, the magistrate, the Wexton girls, a London cousin of Lord Asquith's who had ridden up that afternoon, went perfectly silent for one long,
considering, deeply satisfied beat, and then began, raggedly, sincerely, and with a growing volume, to applaud. Aunt Matilda Halford, at the far end of the room, in a gown of the wrong colour, dropped her fan. The bishop's chaplain picked it up. He returned it to her, with the gentle, distracted courtesy of a man who has just realized that the lady beside him is not, on the whole, the person at this dinner whose hand he should be holding. Aunt Matilda did not get a second chance to speak that evening. She tried, at fish, with a remark across the table on young women whose constitutions had always inclined toward the morbid. Helena lifted her water glass. She turned to Aunt Matilda. She said pleasantly, in a voice that travelled the length of the table, as Lady Wexton's good cut glass had been designed 40 years ago to allow voices to travel. Aunt Matilda, the Wexton Library was redrawn in 1814 by a hand that you described, at this very table that year, as morbid. The library has, since 1815, hosted 3 bishops and 1 Chief Justice. I should be very interested in your opinion on the proportion of the South Oriel. Have you been into the library yet this evening? Aunt Matilda Halford had not been into the library that evening. Aunt Matilda Halford had, in fact, drawn no more architectural opinions in any room for the rest of her natural life. Lady Wexton smiled, very faintly, into her soup. The Duke of Stanmore did not smile at all. His dark blue eyes met Helena's across the table for a single grave, considering, delighted second, and Helena, in ruby silk and a black sash and a bronze medal, did the smallest and most unexpected thing she had done in 8 years. She winked at him. Once. A small, definite, draftsman's wink. Edmund Cresswell, Duke of Stanmore, dropped his bread roll into his soup. He recovered it gracefully. Lady Wexton, who had not missed it, made a small, satisfied sound and signalled to her butler for the next course. The look was the same look. It had only had time to mean, since November, considerably more. The reception in the upper gallery of Spring Street, after the medal had been reconferred, ought to have been a triumph, and was, in the event, an attempt at sabotage. Lord Halford had come to London. He had not been invited. He had, against the express instruction of his solicitor, taken the night coach from Reading, and had presented himself at the door of the Royal Society at 8:30 in the evening, with his peacock blue waistcoat, by now slightly stained at the cuff, under a black overcoat, and with the determined, brittle smile of a man who has decided that the only way to survive the next hour is to behave as if nothing in his life has gone wrong. He came up the great stair behind the last of the late-arriving guests. He had timed it. He intended to walk into the gallery, to embrace his daughter publicly with an air of paternal pride, to claim, by sheer force of London charm, a share of the evening's narrative. He had, in his own mind, rehearsed 3 paragraphs. He did not deliver any of them. The Duke of Stanmore had been told, by the society porter at the door, that an uninvited gentleman in a peacock blue waistcoat was attempting entry. The Duke had, with extraordinary calm, asked the porter to admit Lord Halford. He had then crossed the gallery, courteously, without urgency, and intercepted Lord Halford at the threshold of the room. "My lord," he said quietly, with one hand at Lord Halford's elbow, in a grip that did not invite argument. "May I have the courtesy of a private word with you in the antechamber before you address my lady, your daughter?" Lord Halford, whose plan had not survived its first contact with the firm, white pressure of the Duke of Stanmore's chisel-scarred thumb against the inside of his elbow, allowed himself to be turned aside. The antechamber was small, panelled in oak, lit by a single oil lamp on a side table, and smelled faintly of dust and beeswax. The Duke of Stanmore closed the door behind them. He did not raise his voice. "My lord," he said, "I am going to say 4 things. I am going to say them in a quarter of the time it would take you to interrupt me, and at the end of the 4, I am going to ask you a single question, and the answer to that question will determine whether you walk back down the great stair tonight under your own power, or whether I summon the society's porter to assist you. Are we clear?" "Your Grace, first."
The medal that hung in your study for 2 years was not yours. You knew it. You sold it on. We have located the 4 buyers. They have all surrendered the works in their possession. You will, by the end of January, repay to me, with interest, the sum of £700 I paid you in June. You will repay to Lord Winchcombe, Lord Asquith, the trustees of the Norwich Chapel, and 3 other clients the sums that, by ledger, are owed to them. The schedule is in my solicitor's hands. The schedule is not negotiable. Your second. You will, by the spring, transfer the principal of your daughter's marriage settlement, the £6,000 you accumulated under cover of the firm's fees, into a trust, under the joint signature of my solicitor and Lady Helena's. The trust will fund a scholarship in her name at the Royal Society of Architects. The first such scholarship will be conferred in 1820 on a young woman of demonstrated promise who lacks, as your daughter once lacked, a means of being heard. You will not have any further interest in the trust beyond your initial deposit. Your third. You will not, henceforth, attempt to enter any room in which Lady Helena Halford is present without her express, written permission. You will not write to her. You will not write to Lady Cordelia Halford. You will not, by my requirement, leave Halford Manor for any visit longer than 4 days in any given month. You may walk the grounds. You may visit your bookseller. You may not present yourself in society. You cannot. Fourth, Edmund said quietly. You walked this evening into the Royal Society of Architects to attempt, in front of 300 witnesses, a public performance of paternal pride that would, in your own assessment, have rebuilt your standing. I am going, in the next 90 seconds, to walk you back into that gallery. I am going to escort you to the corner where Lady Wexton is standing with the Bishop of London. I am going to allow you to bow to your daughter from a distance of 12 feet. You will say nothing. You will not approach her. You will accept Lady Wexton's introduction to the bishop with whatever grace remains to you. You will leave the building within the quarter hour. You will be permitted to leave the building under your own power on this single occasion, as a courtesy to your daughter, who, despite everything, has asked me this afternoon to permit it. A pause. Lady Helena's request is the only reason you are not, at this moment, leaving by the kitchen door. Are we clear? My lord. Lord Halford had gone the colour of bone china. He did not speak. He could not. Your answer, my lord. Yes, Lord Halford said. Yes, your grace. Yes, your grace. Thank you. Take my arm. He took the Duke of Stanmore's arm. The two of them walked back into the gallery. The Duke escorted Lord Halford across the room with a courtesy so complete that no observer who had not been told what was happening could have identified, in the journey from the door to Lady Wexton's corner, anything but a mild and cordial exchange between a great peer and a county gentleman of small consequence. Lord Halford bowed, at 12 feet, to his elder daughter. Helena, in deep green velvet with the bronze medal at her throat, returned the bow with the perfect quarter inclination of a woman receiving a stranger. She did not approach. She did not speak. Her grey-green eyes registered her father, registered the Duke beside him, registered the shape of the agreement they had clearly reached in the antechamber, and said, entirely without words, "Thank you." Lord Halford left the building 17 minutes later, in a hired chaise, on the post road back to Reading. He never re-entered London society. He lived for 14 further years at Halford Manor, with his wife in the small cottage at the end of the park, and the two of them did not speak again, and the staff continued to refer to the small cottage as the Dower House, and the staff continued to be correct. Helena did not, in any of those 14 years, write to him. Cordelia, after many letters from Bath, eventually decided to. That was Cordelia's choice. Helena did not interfere. There were, in the end, some doors one did not need to open, and some doors one did not need to keep closed. Helena had spent 8 years inside one of each. She felt no further obligation to choose between them. The Duke of Stanmore came back to Helena's side at 24 minutes past 9 in the evening. The reception had reached the comfortable, talkative second hour. Sir John Soane had retired to a window seat with a glass of Madeira, and Lord Asquith of Devon. Lady Wexton was charming the bishop. The young architects of the society, 3 of whom had, that very afternoon, written to Helena in carefully respectful hands, asking whether they might call upon her in the spring at Stanmore, were standing together in a corner, watching her without quite daring to approach. Edmund offered her his arm.
Lady Helena, I should like, with your permission, to walk you out onto the small balcony beyond the window. There is, on the balcony, no rain at present. There is a light wind and a view of the Thames. There are 2 reasons I should like to walk you there, and only one of them is the wind. Your Grace? Will you come? I will. He led her past the small group of young architects, who all bowed, and past Sir John Soane, who lifted his Madeira glass in a quiet salute, and past Lady Wexton, who was very pointedly not looking, and out through a long sash window onto a stone balcony 8 feet wide and 12 feet long that overlooked the river. The rain had stopped. The wind off the Thames was cold and clean. A line of barge lanterns moved slowly downstream. He closed the long window behind them. Helena set her gloved hand on the iron rail of the balcony. She did not look at him for a long moment. She looked at the lanterns on the river. Your Grace, she said. 8 years ago, I stood in the Rose Walk at Halford and told my father I would not marry until I had built my own house. I am 27 years old. Mr. Dixon will set the keystone of the Stanmore East Wing at the end of February. The house I will have built will not be mine. It will be yours. I have, until tonight, considered that acceptable. The house was always going to be the house I drew. I did not require the house to be the one I lived in. She turned to him. Your Grace, she said, I would like, this evening, to revise that calculation. Edmund Cresswell did not move, for one count of 2. Then he reached, very carefully, into his inside coat pocket and took out a folded piece of paper. He did not open it. He held it. Lady Helena, he said, I've been carrying this in this coat for 11 days. I'd intended to present it on Christmas Eve in the small library at Halford, in your presence and Cordelia's, with her aunt's blessing already in writing. I had taken the trouble of drafting it as a contract, because I knew that of all things in the world, a thing on paper was the form of declaration you were most likely to be able to receive without flinching. I have come to suspect, in the last hour, that you might prefer to read it tonight. Your Grace. Helena. Your Grace. Read it now. He held it out. She took it. Her ink-stained, ungloved fingers, the gloves had come off when she had lifted the medal at her throat, opened the folded sheet. The paper was a single page. It was written in his own slanted, decisive hand. It was dated December the 20th, 1818. It contained 6 lines. Heads of agreement between Edmund Cresswell, Duke of Stanmore, and Lady Helena Halford, architect of record. 1. The architect engages to design, draw, and oversee the construction of the south wing of Stanmore, beginning April 1819. Term, 8 months. 2. The architect's compensation. £500 upon signature. £1,000 upon completion. Full attribution at the keystone. 3. The architect retains entire and uncontested authority over every line of the design. 4. The architect may live, during the term of the commission, in the small cottage at the head of the Beach Avenue, with a separate fund for staff and household. 5. The architect may, at the end of the 8 months, on the placement of the keystone, choose A. To leave Stanmore with £500 in addition to her stated fee, free of any further obligation, or B. To remain. 6. The architect's choice is hers absolutely. The patron will accept whichever she makes. Helena read it twice. She read the 6th line 3 times.
She lifted her face to the wind off the river.
"Your Grace," she said, "may I ask one question?"
"Yes."
"In the event of remaining."
"Yes."
"What does the patron consider remaining to mean?"
A pause. "Helena," Edmund said, "I will tell you in plain English, and I will not hide behind the contract."
"Tell me."
"It means," Edmund said, "that I will ask you, on the placement of the keystone of the south wing, in the daylight, in the open courtyard of Stanmore, in the hearing of Mr. Dixon and his men, and your sister, and Lady Wexton, and any other witnesses of your choosing, to marry me, to live in the house you have drawn, to draw further houses, to bear my name, if you wish, to keep your own name on every drawing you make, to take whatever proportion of my life suits the proportion of yours." He paused. He set his palm flat against the iron rail. He did not look away. "I will ask it once, in those words, on that day. I will ask it because I love you. I have loved you, I think, since you handed me a folded drawing through a third-floor casement on a length of darning thread. I had not known, before that morning, that a woman's mind could so completely arrange the air in a building before the building was built." A breath. "I had drawn the brief in 1816 with the most exact specifications I could devise because I had, without admitting it, wanted to be impressed by the answer. I was. The answer impressed me 18 months before I had laid eyes on the woman who had written it. I have, since the 2nd of November, been in the company of that woman almost daily, and I have learned, slowly, that she is more interesting than her drawings, which I had not believed possible." A breath. "Helena, I am asking you, in the absence of the keystone, in the absence of the daylight, in the wrong city, at the wrong hour, on the wrong balcony, because there will not be another moment between now and April, when I am sure you can hear what I am about to say. I am asking you to consider, in the next quarter of a minute, whether you would prefer to choose B." The wind off the Thames moved her dark auburn hair against her temple. The bronze medal at her throat caught the light from the window behind them. Helena Halford put the folded contract back into the Duke of Stanmore's hand. "Your Grace," she said, "I do not require the contract." A pause. "Helena." "You may keep it for your records. I will sign it in the morning, in the presence of your solicitor, with the sole amendment that the architect's compensation be paid into the trust at the Society. I will require no further fee. I will also require," she lifted her chin a fraction, "that you call me by my given name, beginning at this hour, in any room that contains the two of us. I have decided that the north elevation will, in fact, be drawn perfectly well tomorrow, regardless of what we call each other. I believe I have, this fortnight, been incorrect on that point." Helena. Edmund. His given name fell out of her mouth as if she had been carrying it for months, and had set it down only because the table was at last steady. The Duke of Stanmore set the contract on the iron balcony rail. He set both his hands, very lightly, on her face, the way a man sets his hands on a beam he has finally been given permission to put weight on, and he kissed her. The kiss took a long count of 3. It was not, by the standards Helena had read about in the 4 poets her aunt had not been permitted to confiscate, a particularly accomplished kiss. It was, however, a careful kiss, an attentive kiss, a kiss in which a man with a chisel-scarred thumb on the angle of her jaw was very plainly trying to learn what shape her mouth made when she was not, for once, instructing anyone in anything. She found, to her great and rather inconvenient interest, that she had a perfectly clear opinion on the proportions of the second-column footing of his upper lip. She filed the opinion for later. She gave him another count of 3. Then she stepped back. She put one ink-stained palm flat against the cold iron rail. She drew breath. She looked up at him with grey-green eyes that had, for the first time in 8 years, The warmth of the November sun on the gravel of Halford Manor. "Edmund," she said, "we will go back inside now. We will, both of us, need to be very dignified for the next 30 minutes. I do not believe I am capable, at present, of a second kiss. Not in this city. Not on a public balcony. Not in front of Sir John Soane. I will, on the placement of the keystone, give you a more complete reply. In the daylight, in the courtyard, in the hearing of Mr. Dixon and his men, and my sister and Lady Wexton, as you described." "Helena." "Yes." "You are accepting B." "I am." "In April." "In April." "You will permit me, this evening, to do nothing more than walk you back into the room and bow to you across it." "You will permit yourself nothing more, Your Grace, until April. You may write me letters. I will write you letters. The letters may, between now and April, contain, within reason, a quantity of feeling that the public balconies of London do not permit." A pause. "I am informed by Cordelia, who is currently in Bath, that this is the correct outcome. Cordelia is rarely wrong about correct outcomes. Helena." "Yes?" "I love you." "I know," Helena said quietly. "I have, since the morning under the casement, been waiting only to find out whether you would have the courage to say it before April. I am pleased that you did. It will make the next 4 months considerably more bearable for both of us." He laughed, once breathless, surprised, the laugh of a man who had spent 11 days carrying a folded contract in an inside coat pocket and had only just realized he could put it down. And then he offered her his arm, and the two of them walked back through the long sash window into the gallery, where Lady Wexton glanced at their faces precisely once across the room and said into her glass to no one in particular, "Excellent. We may now have supper." The keystone of the Stanmore East Wing was set on the morning of the 18th of April, 1819, by Mr. Dixon and 3 of his men, with Lady Helena Halford watching from the courtyard in a riding habit of indigo wool and the bronze medal pinned at her shoulder, and a half-circle of witnesses standing behind her on the gravel. The witnesses included Lady Wexton of Wexton House, the Duchess of Argyll, who had ridden down from Scotland the previous week on the rumour of an interesting morning, Cordelia Halford of Bath, who had grown half an inch and read 4 kinds of book and now had opinions on all 4, Aunt Frances of Bath, Mr. Dixon's wife, Sir John Soane, 3 of the young architects who had written to Helena from Spring Street in December, Mrs. Beach, who was crying without dignity and without apology, and the Duke of Stanmore, who stood at Helena's left in dust-streaked work clothes with no neckcloth and a chisel scar on his bare left thumb. When the keystone was set, when Mr. Dixon had stepped back and lifted his cap and said, "Architect, my lady, the wing is built," the Duke of Stanmore turned to Helena Halford in the courtyard and said, in the daylight, in the open courtyard of Stanmore, in the hearing of Mr. Dixon and his men, and her sister and Lady Wexton, and every witness she had requested, the words he had told her in December, on the balcony at Spring Street, that he would say in April. "Lady Helena Halford, architect of record, I love you. Will you marry me? Will you live in the house you have drawn? Will you draw further houses? Will you take whatever proportion of my life suits the proportion of yours? I am asking it once. I will accept whichever answer you give." Helena set her ink-stained, ungloved hand against the rough, warm, sun-touched stone of the keystone of the house she had built. "Your Grace," she said clearly. "Edmund, I will." The wedding was small. It took place at Wexton House on the 2nd Saturday of June, in the small family chapel, conducted by the Bishop of London, who had, that winter, formed an unexpected and, he reported in his correspondence, rather thrilling friendship with Lady Wexton. Helena wore a deep green silk gown and the bronze medal at her throat. Cordelia carried her sister's bouquet, which contained 1 trained pear blossom branch from Halford, and 3 stems of lavender from the cottage at Bath. The Duke of Stanmore wore a coat that was, by the housekeeper's strenuous private intervention, free of dust streaks for the only morning in the calendar year. Sir John Soane gave the bride away. He did so quietly, with one papery, satisfied hand on her arm and one sentence in her ear at the chapel door. "Lady Helena, I am 83 years old. I have been waiting 50 years to give a bride away who knew the deflection coefficient of her own veil. Walk slowly." She walked slowly. 1 year and 7 months later, on a still cold January morning in the year 1821, Lady Helena Cresswell, Duchess of Stanmore, architect of record of the south wing of Stanmore, which stood completed in honey-coloured stone in the fold of the Downs at the head of the Beech Avenue, and which had been opened, at her insistence, to 4 young men and 2 young women of the Royal Society of Architects on a scholarship of her name, walked across the central court of Stanmore in the early light, with her ink-stained palm closed over an ivory pencil stub. It was the same ivory pencil stub. She had carried it inside her sleeve, through every room of 2 great houses, for nearly 11 years. She crossed the court. She passed under the bay window of the east wing, where the November sun would, in 8 months, fall at 1 minute before noon. She went up the short flight of steps to the threshold of the south wing, the wing she had drawn in 8 months of letters between London and Bath and Halford and Stanmore, the wing she had cut into the slope of Stanmore at her own absolute discretion, the wing she had completed in time to be the room in which her daughter had, 3 weeks ago, been born. The south wing's threshold was a single broad slab of grey stone, cut in the Saxon manner. Above the threshold, hung on 2 iron pegs by Mr. Dixon's own hand, was a slate plaque. The plaque had been engraved in Bath. Cordelia had carried it home in her own carriage at Christmas. The engraving on the plaque, in a clean, unornamented Roman capital, read, "Architect of Record, Lady Helena Cresswell. Founded, April 1820. Completed, November 1820. She set her hand against the slate. The slate was cool. The morning was very still. Inside, in the south-facing nursery she had drawn herself, on the long oak table that had once stood in the half-roofed folly above Stanmore, her daughter, Frances Cresswell, 3 weeks old, dark-haired, alert, possessed of a small, considering mouth, was being held, in a state of great competence and considerable pride, by her father. "Helena," Edmund called quietly from the open doorway. "She has, I am informed, opinions about the proportion of the bay window." "Then she has been correctly raised," Helena said. She stepped over the threshold. She did not lock any door behind her. She did not, in the rest of her life, lock the door of any room in which any woman she loved was working. The ivory pencil stub stayed inside her sleeve. The November light, when it next came, fell, as predicted, to the half-degree, on the breakfast table, and not on the floor. Pull your chair closer for 1 more minute. Tell me, in the comments below, the line in this story you had to play back. Subscribe if you would like another Fireside Hour next week.